I've created a new layer on this cowbell track, and I've named it New Cowbell Part, and I created it from this menu here, and I'm going to record a new take. All right, and let me just trim this to round it to the bar. And in this video, we're going to look at working with transient detection and the audio bend panel. Earlier in the series, we just quantized it and it worked fine. We don't need to get into bend markers for simple quantizing, but I want to look a bit closer at what's going on. I'm going to close up strip silence so we can get to the bend panel with this button over here, and a new set of parameters appears. We can also get to it from under the additional views, audio bend. And first thing I'm going to do is hit Analyze, and we have two modes, Standard and Sensitive. So before I hit Analyze, I'm just going to show you another way to do it, or you can right-click here and just go Detect Transients. And that's the same thing as pressing Analyze, and it's detected all the transients and placed these bend markers in place. Let's zoom a little bit, and we'll look a bit more closely at what's going on. Now, to start with, there's some simple ways to navigate through these bend markers. I'm going to start by double-clicking in the bottom, and that'll open up the audio editor here. And in either this arrange view or here, we can just place the cursor and hit tab, and that's a tab to transient function where it's moving to the transients. And if we go command with the backspace key, it's going to move back. So tab for forward, command for backspace, and that's control on Windows. Now we can go shift tab to select between the transients, and we can go shift command with the backspace to remove the different segments from the selection, and that's the control key with shift and backspace on Windows. Now this is obviously a very percussive part and the detection is bang on, but we have a threshold slider here for sensitivity, and as I lower it, you'll see some of the bend markers being removed from detection, the quieter ones. And if I move it all the way up beyond 80%, which is the default, there would theoretically be more, although in this case there aren't because of the nature of the part. So 80 is the default. And we can also show or hide the bend markers from view here. It's a good idea to view them when we're working with this type of editing, but we can use this button to hide them from view, although they are still visible. You can even see the selection here in the background. So I'm going to enable them for the moment. Now, the idea is that these bend markers are used to stretch or compress the audio. And we can use the bend tool here to create and manipulate them. I'm going to start by zooming a little bit. And let's say, for example, I can click at the end here and create a bend marker, and then maybe I want to use it to compress that hit so it's shorter sounding. Maybe I want to move this one back to the fourth beat. What I can do is start by clicking here to create a bend marker for this one to act as a kind of anchor, and then I can click there and then drag that back to 4, but it's stretching it. It'll sound a little expanded and sound kind of drunk. So I want to shorten that a bit. I'm going to put another marker at the end and just tighten that up. So that works fine, and make it even a bit shorter, and let's listen with the drum groove. So that works fine. Now we can double click to get rid of bend markers. I'll just hit Command Z to undo. And we can right click on them to reset them, or cut, copy, and delete them. And we can also, let's say I'll click a new one here. We can hold down the Alt key to move them around without doing any time stretching. And I'll just double click that one to delete it. Now I'm just going to hit 1 to switch back to our main tool, and we'll look at the bend marker panel here. So let's select this audio event. And here, in addition to the threshold settings, we can remove the bend markers, or we can restore the timing. So if I hit remove, they're all going to be removed. Let me hit undo. And what I want to do is save them, but I want to just restore the timing so I don't get those notes truncated and stretched, and everything's back to normal. And we can also change the time stretching algorithm that's used for this track here. And there's different algorithms for different type of material. And we can also, of course, do this here in the inspector. Now, what we can use these bend markers for is to either quantize based on these bend markers or slice into individual audio events. Now, before we explore these, I'm just going to remove all of the bend markers because there were some that I created manually. And I want to just trigger a fresh analysis, and that's fine. So to start with, we can quantize here based on the values we have in our quantize settings. So let's go to 16th notes. Remember, we had a bit of swing. That should work fine. I'll leave the range up to 100%. And that all looks good. So let's go back to the bend marker panel over here. And we can simply quantize, and it'll stretch and compress as necessary. So let's hit apply. And that looks pretty good. It'll probably sound good. Let's listen in context with the drum loop. All right, so that's working fine, and it's doing exactly what we need. Let's just hit Command-Z and undo, and we'll explore the other option. So rather than quantize, we can have this audio event split into individual audio events based on the bend markers. And when we split it, we can split those events and quantize the start points. Now we have auto fade, which will add fades in and out of each of the events that are created based on this number of milliseconds that we have here. And I'm going to leave this disabled. Or we have autofill, which will generate some material to fill any gaps that might result from the stretching or compressing. Or we can merge it all into one individual event. I'm going to leave these all off for the moment. And let's hit apply, where it'll quantize by 100%. And it's created individual events. And since there wasn't much compression or expansion happening, there's really no big gaps to speak of. But they're all individual events. So let's go back to the beginning. So that works really nicely. I'm going to end off here, and we'll look at another way of dealing with this cowbell event in the next video.